A thrilling mix of danger and chance keeps the listener engaged from the start, and that is exactly what makes this story such a powerful tool for learning. Imagine sitting on the edge of your seat, knowing that at any moment a sudden twist could change everything. That is the effect of danger. It doesn't allow the mind to wander. It forces the senses to sharpen, the ears to listen more closely, and the heart to beat a little faster. Now imagine combining that with chance, the spin of a roulette wheel, the uncertainty of where the ball will land, the risk that could bring either victory or loss in a single instant. Together, danger and chance work like a perfect pair, pulling the listener deeper into the story, making every word feel alive. When the listener hears about gunfights, they aren't just hearing about bullets or conflict. They are hearing about moments of decision, moments where every move matters. These scenes remind us that life often presents sudden challenges, and language learning is no different. Just as a character in a gunfight must pay attention to survive, a learner must pay attention to each phrase, each sentence, to build understanding. The thrill of it all is that every new word carries a sense of risk, will it be remembered or forgotten, mastered or missed. And when chance comes into play, like a roulette wheel spinning endlessly before landing on its final number, it mirrors the uncertainty learners often feel. They may not know exactly how much they will understand or how quickly they will improve, but the suspense of discovery is what makes the process exciting. Danger sharpens focus. Chance stirs curiosity. The mind cannot drift when it is confronted by these two forces. That is why this mix is so effective for learning English. A flat, predictable story might be easier, but it would not be remembered. The listener might hear the words but not feel them. But with the combination of suspense and risk, the learner is carried forward almost without effort, eager to know what comes next and eager to understand it. The language itself becomes part of the action. Words are no longer just symbols on a page or sounds in the air. They become part of the fight, part of the gamble, part of the struggle to survive or succeed. This balance between danger and chance also reflects the way real life often works. Every day involves risks, decisions, and unexpected outcomes. When learners hear these themes woven into a story, they connect on a personal level. They feel what it means to take a chance. They recognize the tension of facing something uncertain. That recognition builds empathy, and empathy makes language more powerful. The story doesn't just teach vocabulary, it teaches how to think and feel in a new language. That is what makes it unforgettable. As the chapters unfold, the rhythm of the story moves between tension and release, between moments of high action and moments of quiet uncertainty. This rhythm mirrors the natural flow of conversation and thought. It teaches learners to navigate English in the same way they navigate suspense, with patience, with courage, and with attention. When a listener learns in this kind of environment, they don't just remember words, they experience them. They live them, and when language is lived, it lasts. So the thrilling mix of danger and chance is not just there to entertain. It is there to guide, to train the ear and the mind to stay alert, to embrace uncertainty, and to learn in a way that feels alive. The excitement is not a distraction. It is the very reason the story works as a learning tool. It captures the listener and refuses to let go until the final word is spoken. That is the true power of this story. It teaches by thrilling, it educates by exciting, and it proves that learning English can be as gripping as a gunfight and as unpredictable as a roulette wheel. Gunfights symbolize sudden conflict, courage, and survival under pressure, and when we think about them in the context of a story, they carry much more meaning than the sound of shots or the image of opponents facing each other. A gunfight is a moment where time seems to stop, where choices must be made in seconds and where the consequences of hesitation can be immediate. This sudden conflict demands clarity, and for the listener, it creates an intensity that holds their attention. In language learning, that same intensity can be mirrored. The learner must react to unfamiliar words, grasp meaning quickly, and hold on to context before it slips away. Just like in a duel, there is no room for long pauses. Every second matters. In these stories, a gunfight does not always stand for violence alone. It symbolizes the tests life throws at us when we least expect them. Conflict does not always come in the form of weapons. Sometimes it comes as a challenge to our determination, a barrier to our progress, or an unexpected twist in our journey. When learners hear about a character forced into a standoff, they are also reminded of the challenges they face in mastering a new language. Each unknown word can feel like an opponent drawing closer, each difficult phrase like a shot fired in their direction. But within that tension lies the opportunity to grow stronger, to prove their courage by facing the challenge head on. Courage is the central thread that runs through every gunfight scene. The listener is not only watching characters fight for survival, but also witnessing bravery in action, the refusal to give up, the will to stand firm even when the odds are stacked against them. This courage translates beautifully into the journey of learning. It takes bravery to start something new, to admit mistakes, and to keep going despite difficulties. The characters in a gunfight show that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. And this lesson reaches the listener in a way that is both subtle and unforgettable. Survival under pressure is another powerful symbol hidden in these moments. A gunfight is not won by panic, but by calm focus, quick thinking, and the ability to adapt. Learners face the same demand when trying to follow a story in a new language. They cannot stop and translate every word. They must keep listening, keep moving, and make sense of the story even under pressure. It is in this high-tension space that the mind becomes sharper and memory becomes stronger. Just as a character survives by trusting instincts, a learner survives by trusting their growing skills. The more they face these moments of pressure, the more natural the language begins to feel. The beauty of a story that includes gunfights lies in how it transforms conflict into a lesson. These scenes remind us that life itself is a series of battles, some small and some overwhelming, but each requiring resilience. By listening to the tension of a showdown, learners are not only entertained, but also inspired to hold on when their own learning feels like a battle. They are shown that pressure does not always destroy, it can also forge strength. This message slips gently into the mind, carried by the rhythm of the story and the vividness of the action, until it becomes a truth the listener can carry into daily life. And perhaps the most important element is how these moments of sudden conflict reveal character. In a gunfight, we discover who is bold, who hesitates, who stays calm, and who falls apart. In the same way, when learners face the test of a challenging story, they discover their own resilience. They learn whether they will give up when the words feel too fast, or whether they will stand their ground and keep going until the meaning becomes clear. Each victory, no matter how small, builds confidence, just as each survival in a gunfight builds a reputation. So when we talk about gunfights as symbols, we are not only speaking of action or suspense. We are speaking of courage revealed in crisis, of challenges turned into growth, of survival that sharpens strength. These stories bring that lesson alive with every tense moment, and in doing so, they prove that sudden conflict is not only a danger, but also a chance to rise higher. Roulette represents luck, risk-taking, and the uncertainty of every choice. And when we hear the wheel spinning in the story, it is more than just a game. It is a symbol of how life itself often works. The small white ball dances around the rim, and for a moment everything hangs in suspense. Will it land on red or black, odd or even, the number guessed or the one ignored? That tiny moment before the ball settles carries a weight of expectation, a reminder that so much of life is shaped by chance. And that is exactly what makes it such a powerful image in storytelling, because it reminds the listener that every decision carries risk, every outcome is uncertain, and yet we keep playing, we keep choosing, and we keep moving forward. When the story places roulette in front of us, it is not only showing a character at a table in a casino, it is showing the human instinct to test fate. To sit before uncertainty and dare to participate is itself an act of courage. Every learner of a new language can relate to that. Each time they open a book or listen to a story, they are taking a risk. They may not understand every word. They may feel uncertain about grammar, unsure about pronunciation, but they play the game anyway. The spin of the wheel mirrors the leap of faith it takes to step into a sentence without knowing exactly how it will end. Luck, of course, is the most obvious part of roulette, and it is something we all recognize. Sometimes luck brings reward without much effort, and other times it seems cruel, no matter how carefully we play. But luck is not only chance, it is also opportunity. In learning, luck comes in the form of words remembered at just the right time, or phrases overheard in a moment of need. It comes when a sentence suddenly makes sense because the mind connects the dots. The listener feels a kind of fortune then, a stroke of luck that makes all the effort worthwhile. And just as in the casino, luck in learning cannot be controlled, but it can be invited by showing up, by playing, by taking part. The other face of roulette is risk. Every spin means something is at stake. The chips placed on the table are not just markers of wealth. They are symbols of commitment. Risk shows that we value the outcome enough to put something of ourselves on the line. In the story, this risk heightens the suspense because we know loss is possible. For learners, risk is part of the journey. To speak out loud in a new language, to make mistakes in front of others, to listen and try to respond even when uncertain. All of this feels like betting chips on the table. Yet without risk, there is no reward. Without daring to lose, there is no chance of winning. That is why roulette is such a striking image. It teaches us that to progress, we must risk failure, and through that failure, we edge closer to success. Uncertainty is what ties it all together. No one knows where the ball will land until the final moment. That tension is both frustrating and thrilling, and it is what keeps people coming back. In the same way, uncertainty is part of every meaningful learning process. Not knowing what will come next forces us to pay attention, to stay alert, to be fully present. The listener, gripped by the sound of the spinning wheel in the story, also learns to live with uncertainty instead of fearing it. They discover that even without perfect control, they can still move forward, still grow, still learn. What makes roulette so captivating in a story is not whether someone wins or loses in that moment, but the way it reveals character. Some play cautiously, betting small and steady. Others throw everything onto one number, chasing either glory or disaster. The way a person approaches the wheel mirrors the way they approach life itself. And for learners, it mirrors the way they approach English. Do they play it safe, waiting until they are certain of every word, or do they take risks, using what they know and daring to be wrong? The truth is that both approaches shape the journey, and both remind us that uncertainty is not the enemy. It is part of the experience. So roulette does more than add color to a scene. It adds depth to the entire process of listening and learning. It tells us that life and language are games of chance, that risk is necessary, and that uncertainty is where growth lives. And in that spinning wheel, we find not just suspense, but a lesson that lingers long after the ball has landed. The story blends action with suspense, making learning English more exciting, because it never allows the listener to feel that they are only studying. Instead, it draws them into an unfolding world where events move quickly, where danger and uncertainty hover just around the corner, and where every moment matters. Action alone would bring energy, but action without suspense is like a fire that burns too quickly and fades away. Suspense alone would bring tension, but without movement it would drag on and lose its power. When the two are combined, however, something remarkable happens. The listener is pulled forward, unable to let go, carried by both the thrill of what is happening and the mystery of what will happen next. And within that momentum, the words, phrases, and structures of English are absorbed naturally, almost without effort. Action is the heartbeat of the story. It gives rhythm, pace, and intensity. Scenes of pursuit, confrontation, or quick decision, making push the learner to stay alert. The words are not abstract anymore. They are tied to vivid events, and that connection makes them stick. When a character moves, the listener's imagination moves with them. When something explodes into conflict, the learner feels it, and in that feeling, language comes alive. Suspense, on the other hand, is the breath that slows everything down, stretching the moment just before the unknown is revealed. It is the pause before the answer, the silence before the revelation, the lingering question that keeps the mind active. The two forces work together, one pushing forward, the other holding back, creating a rhythm that mimics the very way we experience life. This balance keeps the learner engaged in a way no textbook ever could. When there is action, the mind races. When there is suspense, the mind waits and wonders. Both states sharpen attention, and attention is the foundation of learning. The learner no longer has to force themselves to concentrate, because the story has already done that work for them. Curiosity becomes the teacher, the unfolding events become the guide, and as the story carries them forward, each new word or phrase becomes part of the ride. What makes this blend even more powerful is the emotional engagement it creates. Action brings excitement, suspense brings tension, and together they stir emotions that are impossible to ignore. Language learned in an emotional context is remembered far more deeply than language learned in isolation. A word tied to a moment of fear or victory becomes unforgettable. A phrase linked to the twist of suspense lodges in memory. The learner is no longer repeating vocabulary in a detached way. They are living it, feeling it, and carrying it forward as part of the story. The unpredictability of suspense also mirrors the unpredictability of real conversation. In daily life, we never know exactly how a conversation will unfold. We wait for replies, anticipate reactions, and respond to unexpected turns. Suspense in a story trains the mind to be comfortable with that uncertainty. It teaches patience, active listening, and the skill of holding on until the meaning becomes clear. Action then demands quick reactions, showing the learner how to follow fast, paced exchanges, how to catch meaning in movement, and how to stay engaged without losing track. Together, they prepare the listener not just for stories, but for real-life communication. The combination of action and suspense also ensures variety. A story with only action may feel overwhelming, and one with only suspense may feel slow. But when both are woven together, the experience becomes dynamic and balanced. The learner is carried through highs and lows, fast moments and slow build-ups, just like in real life. This variation keeps motivation alive. It prevents boredom, and it makes the learning process feel like an adventure rather than a task. And perhaps most importantly, this blend makes the story unforgettable. When learners reflect on what they've heard, they may not remember every single line, but they will remember the excitement they felt, the tension they carried, and the resolution that finally came. Those feelings anchor the language to memory. They turn simple listening into an experience. And when learning becomes an experience, it transforms from something difficult into something deeply enjoyable. That is why a story that combines action with suspense is more than just entertainment. It is a lesson disguised as an adventure, a classroom hidden inside a thrilling journey, and it shows that English can be learned not through repetition alone, but through experiences that stir the heart and mind at the same time. Each scene introduces new vocabulary in a natural, memorable way, and that is one of the most powerful aspects of learning through story. Words are not presented as lists to be memorized or rules to be studied in isolation. Instead, they are woven directly into the flow of action, suspense, and dialogue. This makes every new term feel alive, as if it belongs to the moment. When learners encounter vocabulary this way, they are not simply looking at definitions. They are experiencing the words in their natural home. And that is what makes them unforgettable. Think about the difference between reading a dictionary entry for a word and hearing that same word spoken during a tense scene. The dictionary gives information, but the story gives life. A single phrase spoken in the middle of a conflict, or a descriptive word used to set the scene, carries an energy that no textbook can provide. The learner not only understands the meaning, but also feels how it is used, when it is used, and why it matters. This emotional connection makes recall effortless. Later, when they try to remember, the scene itself comes back into focus, and with it, the vocabulary tied to that moment. Stories also repeat words in subtle ways, reinforcing them without feeling repetitive. A term introduced once in action may appear again in suspense, or in dialogue, or in description. Each time it appears, it gains more weight, more nuance, more familiarity. The learner begins to notice how the same word can shift slightly depending on tone or context. Instead of memorizing through drills, they are absorbing naturally, almost unconsciously. This is the way we first learned language as children, not through rules, but through hearing words again and again in meaningful situations. What makes these scenes even more powerful is that the vocabulary is connected to images in the listener's imagination. When a story describes a place, a movement, or an emotion, the mind paints a picture. That picture anchors the word so firmly that it no longer floats as an abstract symbol. It is tied to something the learner can see and feel. When a gun is drawn, or a wheel spins, or a room grows silent with suspense, the words describing those moments fuse with the imagery. Later, the learner does not only remember the word, they remember the entire scene. This is what makes the vocabulary memorable, not because it was memorized, but because it was lived. Even difficult words become accessible in this way. A term that might seem complex in isolation becomes clear when placed in the right scene. The context carries the meaning, the action delivers the feeling, and the suspense locks attention in place. The learner does not need to stop and translate because the story itself explains. This builds confidence. It shows that new vocabulary does not need to be feared. It can be embraced, discovered, and understood naturally. And when confidence grows, motivation follows. Dialogue is another powerful tool in this process. Characters speaking to each other use words that reflect real conversation, not just structured examples. The learner hears questions, answers, hesitations, and exclamations, all the pieces of natural speech. These are the same patterns they will use in their own conversations. By listening to dialogue within the story, they gain not only vocabulary, but also the rhythm of spoken English. The pauses, the tone, the flow, all of it becomes part of the learning experience. Every scene is like a classroom, but it does not feel like one. It feels like being drawn into an adventure where new vocabulary is discovered rather than taught. And because it is discovered, it is remembered. The excitement of action, the tension of suspense, the richness of dialogue, all of these elements ensure that words are not left floating in memory, but rooted in experiences the learner will not forget. That is why stories are such an effective way to learn. They give language its natural shape. They connect vocabulary to feelings and images, and they allow learning to happen in the most human way possible, through experience. And when each new scene carries new words in its flow, learning English stops being a task and becomes an adventure. Listeners practice comprehension while following a fast-paced adventure, and this is where the story proves its true value as a tool for learning. When the pace quickens, when events unfold rapidly, and there is no time to pause or look back, the listener is forced to stay fully engaged. The mind cannot wander, and there is no room for distraction, because the next moment could carry a twist, a danger, or a revelation. This kind of listening trains comprehension in a way that slow exercises never could, because it demands attention and rewards focus. It is not just about hearing words, it is about understanding meaning as it races past, just like life itself. The adventure at the center of the story creates the perfect environment for this. Action moves quickly, suspense stretches the silence, and dialogue pushes the plot forward. Each of these elements requires the listener to keep pace, to gather meaning not only from the words but from the flow, the tone, and the rhythm. The story becomes an exercise in active comprehension, where the learner is constantly connecting ideas, predicting outcomes, and piecing together context. This is exactly how real communication works. In everyday conversation, no one waits while you translate each word. People speak quickly, emotions rise, and meaning must be grasped in the moment. The fast-paced nature of the adventure mirrors this reality, preparing the learner for true fluency. One of the most powerful aspects of this process is that comprehension grows naturally, without the feeling of forced effort. The listener may not catch every word, but they do not need to. The pace of the adventure pushes them to focus on the bigger picture, the actions, the emotions, the consequences. This shift from focusing on individual words to focusing on overall meaning is a turning point in language learning. It teaches the mind to think in the new language rather than constantly translating back and forth. Over time, comprehension becomes faster, smoother, and more intuitive. The thrill of the story also plays an important role. When learners are emotionally invested in what happens next, they listen more carefully, and that careful listening strengthens comprehension. A fast-paced adventure holds the same power as a gripping conversation. It keeps the listener present, waiting for the next detail, the next word, the next clue. Every pause, every shift in tone, every sudden burst of action becomes part of the lesson. This kind of listening is not passive. It is alive, active, and deeply memorable. Of course, the pace also creates challenges, but it is within these challenges that growth happens. When a story moves quickly, the listener may miss something, but instead of stopping, they keep going. They learn to fill the gaps, to use context, and to trust their instincts. This skill is invaluable in real-world communication, where no conversation is perfect and no interaction gives time to analyze everything in detail. By practicing comprehension in this fast-paced way, learners build resilience. They learn that missing a word does not mean losing the meaning, and that confidence grows not from perfection, but from persistence. The adventure also adds variety to the listening experience. Some moments are intense and fast, demanding quick comprehension, while others slow down, allowing reflection and deeper focus. This balance of speed and pause mirrors natural communication, where conversations shift from rapid exchanges to thoughtful silences. By experiencing both, learners train themselves to adapt. They become comfortable with speed, but also capable of holding meaning during slower, more suspenseful moments. Another advantage is that the fast pace prevents boredom. Learners are not sitting through dry lessons or repetitive drills. They are riding the wave of an unfolding story. The excitement of movement disguises the effort of learning. Instead of feeling like practice, it feels like participation. And when learning feels like participation, motivation stays strong. Comprehension grows not as a result of discipline alone, but as the natural outcome of engagement and curiosity. This is why a fast-paced adventure is such a valuable teacher. It creates pressure, but it is the kind of pressure that strengthens skills rather than discourages them. It forces the listener to adapt, to keep up, and to trust in their ability to understand. And in that constant exercise, comprehension is not only practiced, it is transformed. That is the gift of following a story that never slows down too much. It trains the ear, sharpens the mind, and shows that learning English can be as thrilling as the adventure itself. Through danger and chance, courage and risk, action and suspense, every scene has carried new words to life. Each moment has sharpened comprehension, turning learning into an adventure rather than a lesson. So as this story closes, remember, the journey of English is not study alone. It is an experience to be lived.